We good, Rich, you think?
It should be, everyone.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you all getting on. This will be our spring training preview for 2021 with President of Baseball Operations, John Daniels, EVP and General Manager, Chris Young, and Manager, Chris Woodward. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand in the queue because we've got a lot of people on here. I'm also going to ask you to please limit your questions to 2 questions. When you do a follow-up, just your main question, a follow-up, and then we'll get back to people as we can. And if you want to hold on to the media after I let these guys go at the end, I'll try to give a little bit of update on spring training. So with that, we'll start taking questions and we'll go to Evan Grant.
Hey guys, Chris Young yesterday mentioned the idea that competition is a real theme at spring training this year. And I wanted both JD and Woodward to address that. And the only thing I would also add as a caveat to that is, John, you have in the past talked about the idea of competition in spring training, but not where guys win or lose jobs based on spring training performance.
Want me to go first, JD?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a huge theme. I think it kind of ties right into the culture we've been trying to create, and which we plan on creating, obviously, with the young group, making these guys understand that everything will be earned. And I think we have a really good opportunity here with the young group. They're a young, hungry group that's going to come in, and there's a lot of competition as far as roster spots go, especially on the pitching side, and obviously on the position player side as well. So I think the competitive environment, like I said, ties into our overall culture, which is going to be a highly competitive one between the lines. And I think that we have the right core group to kind of lead the way in that regard. And spring training is just the beginning of that. This is something that we're going to continue on, obviously, throughout the season as well.
Yeah, I won't. Nobody said that well. I would just add, Evan, to your second question. My comment in the past. You boil down spring training. You're talking about in a normal year, a guy might get 50 to 80 plate appearances, which is, and that's if somebody plays a lot. You wouldn't make too many major decisions based off of a small sample of that, and when half those plate appearances or innings are against players that typically they wouldn't face in the big league, so it's even more skewed. So that's what I mean by spring training performance not dictating the results of those competitions. There's a lot more to it as far as the individual improvement we see from guys, the work that they're putting in, their commitment to reaching the kind of their next step and their overall buy-in there. So it's competitive, but it's not exclusively stat based.
And Woody, the follow-up on that would be, you mentioned the culture. The identity of this team will be caught up a lot in creating that competitive environment and the idea of meritocracy. What else about this team's identity can you kind of instill in this spring training?
I think a ton. And I think that those are all things that, I've talked to a lot of our players and obviously our staff, to hold each other accountable to that. It's the work we do. JD just kind of referenced it. This isn't just about the numbers and the stats. Like, it's about everything. It's everything that they do to earn the at-bats, the innings. It's how they prepare. It's how they work. It's their behavior. It's how they, respectful in the clubhouse, how they treat their teammates. All of the above. And that's what we're looking for. We want a group of young players, and obviously we have some older guys as well that are going to set the tone. But that's what we want. That's what we want from a cultural standpoint, to kind of move this thing forward, not only for this year, but like I said, into the future.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Jeff Wilson.
Chris Woodward, you were kind of asked about this the other day, but you've got Joey Gallo is going to be your right fielder. How's the rest of your outfield going to be with now that you have Chris Davis, Calhoun, Dahl, who can play center and left. I mean, is there a way that Tavares could start in the minors?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a way that somebody. Listen, we were all impressed with what he did last year. Just his attitude, the way he worked, the way he prepared, like all the things that he did, obviously on the field and between the lines. So if it were up to me, obviously, if the season started today, he'd probably be our center fielder. He's got to earn that though in spring training. He's got to continue to do the things, like JD referenced, the growth is we got to see it. But as far as the other outfield spots, obviously Dahl's, in my opinion, a really good outfielder. We feel like he feels like he can take it to another level from a defensive standpoint. So you look at those three guys with Gallo, Tavares, and Dahl, it's a pretty good outfield. Now, getting at bats, and we got two other guys in Willie and Chris Davis that, obviously Willie we love, and he's been here. Chris Davis, we know what he can do with the bat in his hand. So to get these guys at bats, it's going to be a little bit on them. I've challenged Willie to be able to play the outfield. If it's between him and Dahl, whoever's handling the better, against a left-handed pitcher, whoever's handling the bat better at that time, in my opinion, will probably get the start. And Chris Davis obviously can handle left-handed pitching and right-handed pitching for that matter. But when it comes to these solutions will present themselves. I think as we get through spring training, these guys will earn it, and the solutions will kind of appear basically by the way they perform.
When it comes to the roster, 26 guys, it seems like you have a lot of pitchers and a lot of position players that you guys like and want to evaluate. How would you prefer the balance? Would you want an extra pitcher? Would you want a 4-man bench, or even, I don't know, maybe 5? I don't know. How do you see that playing out?
I think that's gonna take a lot of discussion. I mean, obviously we've thought about it. We've had some discussions already, but I think as we go along to see where the roster kind of stands as we get closer to spring training ending, we have our discussions now, but as we get closer to the season, and the way we start the season may not be the way we use it the whole year. We may have a 4-man bench, we may have a 3-man bench to start the season. We don't know. It just depends on how kind of it all shakes out. But I don't know what represents the best for this roster, but those are conversations that we're going to have consistently.
All right. Thank you.
Go to CJ Nitkowski.
Hey, Woody, on those evaluation concerns that you may have, or the ability to do it, as JD was talking about, the buy-in and the other things, how much will data be relied upon? Like, is there going to be things like spin efficiency or exit velocities or things that you guys may have to rely on more than usual because of how difficult it's going to be with the lack of innings and at-bats?
Yeah, I think so. I think we always kind of take a look at our those are our process stats, right? And, they typically coincide with, the real stats, but, in small sample sizes, sometimes they don't. So I think, that communication with the players, where they stand kind of, in their overall numbers, and then obviously in the numbers that we're really looking at. And I think each player has their own individual kind of blueprint for their success. And I think that's on us as a staff to kind of show that to them. Certain guys need to, watch how much, how their swing percentage or their hard hit, balls in their trajectory may be different. Joey Gallo's trajectory is a lot different than Kiner's. So those are things that, we got to make sure we're honest and open and, continually communicate with our players so they understand what's expected of them and what their best version of themselves is.
I talked to Willie. We had him on for an hour on radio this morning. And one of the things that he brought up was, as far as the protocols go, one of his biggest frustrations or things that he struggled with was post-game, especially if he had a bad game or had a couple of bad games, and the inability to really unwind like you usually can in a regular season, and how important that was to him. Has that come up with the guys at all? Is there any solutions perhaps that the team may have, or some ideas they may have to help guys in that important part, which is the psychological part, maybe when things aren't going great or just post game?
That is probably one of the biggest issues that we saw last year, and honestly for myself as well, with the staff. And those are the moments where you reflect on the game and you kind of wind down and you just talk baseball. And we got to figure out a solution to that, because that's something that with a young team, I want our guys to do. I want our guys to communicate about the game and understand, what just happened. It's the best time to kind of talk about it, especially if they're willing to talk about it. So we've come up with a solution. I know we had discussions after games last year with our younger group, where we literally just put them in a, obviously spaced out and, distance, but we discussed some things that happened in the game and how we can improve. So, for each player, I think it's individual, how they unwind, and it's a different reality than we're all used to. So, hopefully using last year as a reference, we can kind of look and see what we did last year and what worked, what didn't, and kind of hopefully come up with something better this year.
Thanks, Woody.
Go to Stephen Hawkins.
Woody, clearly with Mike Miner, Lance Lynn, and Corey Kluber gone, your rotation going in the spring looks a lot different than it did last year at this time. I know you've added a couple guys, but when you look at Kyle and Jordan, what's been kind of your charts with them and your talks with them this offseason? Where do you see them kind of getting better?
Yeah, both guys honestly have done a ton to understand kind of what went wrong and what they have to do to be good this year. I think our pitching coaches did a really good job of communicating those ideas to them. Both were very open and honest about what they have to do to improve, and I think their work in the off season, the understanding of how their pitches work together and what they needed to kind of, I guess, the solutions for this year. I was really impressed. I was really impressed with the communication that they had, and as they come into camp, they're both pretty excited about kind of putting these things to use in spring training. And I obviously with Gibby, he's going to be at the top of the rotation, and we expect him to be a lot better than he was as Jordan as well.
When you look back and evaluated them as you looked after the season with the shortened season, and we know how crazy it was for everybody, it's hard to evaluate anything really on a normal scale. I mean, what did you see good out of those two? I mean, obviously we look at numbers and you go, they're not that great, but what did you see that gives you hope that was just kind of an outlier for what they can be?
Yeah, last year was tough, and listen, I think everybody had their own way of preparing for last year and the 3 months off. Some guys, did okay with it as far as the physical preparation, the mental preparation. It was tough, and to put it all together and to have it, 3 months off like that, physically, mentally, come back and be able to perform. Listen, I think they weren't great at times, but I think they kept fighting, and they were both open during the season. I know Gibby made some pretty, really good adjustments toward the end of the season. He was very open to that and understands, like, if he wants to be good long term, especially for us, that he needs, he needed to make some adjustments. And same thing with Jordan. Jordan, pitched a lot better at the end of the second half of last year. I think some of the things that got him in trouble, he was a little bit predictable early in the season, so he understands now how to use, more of his pitches, how to sequence his pitches better, shorten up his curveball a little bit. So there's some definite things that they understand how to improve. And I think as we get into this year, they're going to show it right away.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we'll go to Levi Weaver.
So kind of just to expand a little bit on the competition question earlier, I'm looking position by position. Is it fair to say that maybe shortstop and right field are the only two positions that are fairly locked in right now before you go to camp, as far as like the lineup goes? I'm talking about pitching, but just from a position player standpoint.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I mean, I'm looking at the thing now, and yeah, I mean, that's I would say those are probably the two that are the most solidified. And as to JD's point, we're not going to take a spot away from somebody because they have a rough spring training year, and those two guys obviously represent a lot of what we want out of all of our players, just their resiliency and their ability to work every day, their attitude, and they know that, they're expected to kind of, like I said, carry the torch in that regard with the rest of the group. So there are some other guys. Obviously, I probably have Jose behind the plate. I think he's going to get a pretty legitimate shot back there. But yeah, for the most part, the rest of the guys, it is somewhat of an open competition.
And then my second question was just on Jordan Lyles. I heard you talk about some of the adjustments that he made. I remember last year about this time, or maybe it was the winter meetings, we talked about something you guys had identified as far as like pitch selection and like where to put the fastball and where to put the curveball. I'm curious with the struggles that he had last year, just kind of looking back now in retrospect, do you think that that was a lack of, like, it was a good plan and it just wasn't executed, or was there, do you think maybe, or was it a problem with the plan not being quite exactly what you guys had expected?
It's a great question. I think, as we started to really dig into, his struggles from the beginning, it was a lack of execution. I think, the year before, his fastball coming out at the top of the zone was really good. He had a ton of confidence, especially in the second half. His breaking ball, he could land it at any time, any count. I think he really struggled with that last year, early in counts, and it was a different curveball. He actually tried to make it bigger, have more spin, which on the surface seems that would make his pitch better, but it actually took away from a little bit of the tunneling effect and the effect on a hitter. So we try to shorten that curveball back up so it actually plays better off of his fastball. And I think if he would have started this year with that mentality, it would have been a lot better, because that's what it was the year before. But we did actually ask him to use more of his pitches, introduce the sinker back, the slider. He started throwing the slider more, and his changeup as well. So it's, he's got enough of a repertoire to be successful. I think the year before, he was just doing things that nobody had seen him do. And last year, with the lack of execution on top of the predictability, allowed guys to really hit his fastball, because he wasn't throwing his curveball for strikes.
All right, thank you.
Go to Emily.
Is JD still on? And Chris Young? Okay. First for Woody, we kind of talked about this after the Elvis trade. I remember you talking about, and I know you talked to all of your players before spring training, but I remember, you talking to like Chu and Elvis about kind of the direction of the team and the message that you want to convey. Are you having those conversations with certain guys, or are you letting that whole, leadership role kind of unfold as time goes on?
Yeah, I definitely have talked to, specific guys on our team, and, we have a young group. It's a young core. But there's some real leadership there, in different kind of leadership. Obviously, the service time. When you have 10 plus years or 12 years in the big leagues, like, people respect you immediately. When you only have 1 year of service time, like, you got to be more of an example and hold people accountable to the standards which we try to create. So I have to obviously guide a lot more. Our staff has to guide a lot more this year, because we have young leadership that needs to be kind of molded in the direction that we want to go and that we share. And I think it's not just me standing on the top saying, hey, do this. Like, it's all of us. It's the entire organization. We have a collaborative approach in that regard. And, yes, it is, definitely my vision and JD's and CY's vision, but we all share in that, including with the players. So to get them understand that more and more, I think there's just a lot of conversation that has to happen. Obviously that's already started. We started last year when we kind of knew this point was coming, when this young group was going to have to take this team to the next level. So it's pretty exciting. It's a lot of work, but it's pretty exciting to see, the core group that we have. They represent a lot of, in their own way, but a lot of what we want, like, for the future. And they're going to, like I said, carry the torch forward, man. They're gonna move this thing forward, along with what Chu, with what Elvis, with what Adrian, Michael, all these guys kind of instilled in these guys, in their time with them. But now it's time for them to kind of carry it on in their own way.
And then JD, for you and CY, like, it's obviously you have some history there, and so it's not just like you're coming into this relationship blind. But is it kind of like, and this is maybe a terrible analogy, but like when you first start dating someone and you're kind of figuring things out about who does what, who's going to pay for dinner, all those things for you too, as far as balancing the relationship that you guys have within the organization?
You want to go first, CY?
Yeah, sure. Emily, it's a great question. And yes, there's a familiarization that's taking place there. So far I've bought for JD, but I'm hopeful he'll reciprocate at some point. But yeah, it's a partnership, and it's and we're figuring that out, the roles and what we're each going to kind of specialize in, so to speak. That'll become more clearly defined, I think, in time. And I think that some of it's complicated by just the COVID environment in which we're starting. The ability to connect and establish relationships for me has been a little bit of a challenge. I'm super excited to get in a spring training environment. and really connect with a lot of our personnel that in person and start fostering a lot of those relationships. So I'd say at this point, it's me relying on JD more than him relying on me. But that said, I think that it will continue to evolve and probably over the course of our relationship, working together to build the championship team, I think that will always continue.
And one thing, Emily, that I've learned here is that for all the great attributes CY brings, he's a terrible self-evaluator. Either that or he's like way over humble. Obviously he doesn't have experience in the front office of a club here recently up until the last couple of months, and so there is a learning curve from that standpoint. But he's got a great feel for the game and a better feel for people and for he has a real conviction in kind of what he believes to be important in building a team and building an organization, asking questions. I think he's made inroads very quickly with a lot of the people in the organization. So it's been the last couple of months have been a lot of fun for me, just in the daily discussions that we've had. And there's the trust from our relationship over the years, I think is kind of the foundation that's going to make that work, where I trust decisions that he's going to make and vice versa, and we'll discuss probably 99% of things before we move forward. But I think there's an intrinsic confidence in each other there, to where if that conversation doesn't happen beforehand, I trust the reasons that he's going to make whatever the decision is, and vice versa, and extends to Woody and others in our group as well. So it's been fun. Obviously, we've been able to make some transactions, but more importantly, I think we've been able to kind of challenge each other in some of the conversations we've had behind the scenes as far as how we want to structure things going forward.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
You're going to go to Chris Henderson. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, this is for Chris Woodward. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. So you talked about the rotation, and when you look at this relief rotation, you got Hearn, Hernandez, of course, Rodriguez, and a few other guys, Evans as well. They're young. What are you looking to see from them, going into this season? And obviously the possibility of maybe one of those guys moving up to the starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of competition when you look at the pitching staff, and we have some guys obviously that have done pretty well the last couple of years. With Jonathan and Brett Martin, and obviously Jose coming back after being injured, and Joely Rodriguez. I mean, we got a pretty good core down in the bullpen. I feel like our bullpen is going to be a pretty good strength of ours. We got some really good arms, but the rest of the guys, there's going to be a lot of competition for those arms. So what we're trying to see is development. We want to see growth. We want to see maturity. We want to see these guys be able to handle certain situations, and it ultimately comes down to consistently executing and understanding that, their strengths, understanding how they can go out and compete against the best hitters in baseball. And it's exciting, but it's also, there's going to be a lot of work, and, there's going to be some bumps in the road, obviously with the young group, but we got to support them through it and continue to develop them. So, I mean, obviously them being on board with that, some of these guys aren't going to make the team. Wow, a lot of names staring me in the face right now that, we can only have a certain amount of guys, 13 or 14 pitchers. So there will be some guys that don't make the team, but we have to continue to develop those guys, because those guys, like you said, will become our future, either at some point this year, next year, the year after.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to go to Chuck in San Antonio. Face mask, face shield and all. Go ahead, Chuck. You're muted, Chuck. Still muted.
Apologies, fellas. Old dog, new tricks. Anyway, JD, can you talk about what you saw from Josh Young last year in the alternate site? Where's he at? Is his bat ahead of his glove? And what are the expectations for this year?
Sure, Chuck. Yeah. Josh is, we've been having our kind of pre-spring training meetings, and we typically have our kickoff meetings in person, everybody into a big room there in Surprise. And for obvious reasons, we're not doing it that way. So we've had meetings the last couple of days, and we covered our position players yesterday. And so Josh was covered there. And I mean, it was really just a effusive praise. I mean, he's a real, his level of care for both his development and also the team and the development people around him, and his desire to win is through the roof. So I think it amplifies an already really good skill set. I would say his bat, he's always had a really good approach. You saw raw power. You didn't always see it in games, but that's kind of typical. I think for a lot of guys learn to hit first, and the power comes. He's a big man. He's strong. We saw some of that last year start to develop, and not just from a strength standpoint, but I think he understands a little bit better what he's doing at the plate and how people are going to approach him and how he can game plan for that. I mean, you got to remember our alternate site last year, while the guys sometimes would get to work out at our big league park when we're on the road, our alternate site was across the street, which was great, but we had resurfaced that with a turf with rubber pellets in there. And as you know, in the Texas summer, like that surface was not cool to be on, and you could not get him off the field. By all accounts, he's a third baseman, and we see him as a long-term third baseman, but he would run out to the outfield. He was taking balls at second base, in part because of the shift. He may have to move over there, and in part because he just wanted to do it. And then he continued doing the same things at instructional league. So really, really impressed, opened some eyes, very high baseball IQ, very high care factor. Excited to see where it goes.
Thanks, Chuck. Got some follow-ups here. We'll take a few of them. We'll go back to Evan Grant.
Hey, JD, to kind of spin off of what was just asked about Josh, the way this camp is going to work with you not having the ability to call over Jicks, I don't suppose, and with the idea that there's going to be, I would imagine, a bunch of B games. I look at all these young guys like Young and Wenzel and Bubba Thompson, and even some of the pitchers, and it seems like they're going to get more competitive at bats against higher level talent than typically would take place in spring training. And I'm wondering if there's something significant that those guys may get out of this spring training that typically they wouldn't have been able to get out of their first camp.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. One of the themes I think we've talked about is how last year the line between the big leagues and the minor leagues got blurred, right? And in some ways almost beyond last year, it certainly kind of continues into this year and maybe permanently. And that, it worked out really well for us in that, in the rebuilding state that we're in, and we want to play our young guys so that it becomes a feature, not a bug of spring training, where you're absolutely right. Like we invited a lot of these guys. You mentioned Josh or Davis Wenzel. We're excited to see those guys. We're excited to see Yanni Hernandez and Andy Ibanez and Bubba and a number of others. But we intentionally want to bring that group in and not to put kind of veteran, more 4A type depth in front of them. Like, we want these guys to play, whether that's in spring training or during the season or as call-ups as needed. We believe in that group, and this setup allows us more opportunity for them to help us answer questions that we need to answer as we make decisions on the 40-man next winter and going forward. So I think it's a really good opportunity for that group and a good opportunity for our staff too to develop them, but also really get to know these guys.
And Woody, it wouldn't be a spring training preview if I didn't get to drag this one out, but I look at Gibson, Arahara, Lyle, Fultonevich, Cody, and Dunning, and that's 6 starters right there. And I know that with COVID and with the lack of innings last year, I just wonder, once again, are you pondering the idea of a non-traditional, is your intent to create a non-traditional rotation going into the season?
I can't really answer that just yet, but we've definitely considered that, and we've definitely considered other ways to kind of, use multiple guys on same days. So it's all going to honestly play out. I look probably at Gibby and Arahara and Fulte as, I wouldn't say locks, but like those guys are the traditional guys, and the rest is going to kind of we'll see. We'll see where we kind of fall as we go. But I can't answer that just yet. But we've definitely had discussions on a lot of those different topics for sure.
Okay, thanks, man.
Okay, we'll go back to Jeff and then CJ, and then if there's one or two others, we can take them. So go ahead, Jeff.
John Daniels, how do you feel the offseason went for the Rangers? Like, as far as player acquisition and kind of geared toward the idea of a rebuild.
Yeah, we had a plan early on. We adjusted a few times as we went through it, and our goals in part were to to add kind of young players to this group we have at the big league level, also to add young talent throughout the organization. Everybody that we added, we feel like has the ability to have value for us beyond just this year. We felt like we wanted to really put an emphasis on makeup, on defense, and on approach at the plate, so that those were areas that were emphasized. We were able to spend a good deal of time getting ourselves prepared from a player development standpoint and continue to do work behind the scenes there, as well as one of our bigger acquisitions here with CY. So, and getting him acclimated and everything that goes along with that. So listen, I look forward to off seasons where our goals are to add pieces to help us contend in the coming year. I hope this group defies kind of the odds and does that. Look forward to seeing them overachieve and fight through that. But we're also very aware where we are, and we approach this winter with that in mind, to really with 22 and beyond as kind of the true target.
All right, and then has anybody who will be in uniform, coaches, whatever, minor leagues, that you're aware of, received either dose of the vaccine?
It's a good question. I know of a few people that have gotten it in the organization. I can't think of anybody that I know that in uniform, but we haven't asked that question. So it's possible somebody has, and I'm not aware of it.
Okay, and then I know I'm so sad too, but this is a quick one. So, as you know, the weather is horrible here, and it's going to be really in the next week. Will you make exceptions on players getting to camp who are here or who have any difficulty with that 5-day quarantine window or whatever?
Yeah, I mean yes, the answer is yes, of course. If there's reasons that people can't travel safely, we'll be flexible. But the quarantine, as it's set up, allows for some activity. So I think we'll be okay. I just hopefully that probably more concerned for the people that are driving out than are flying. But obviously if people have issues, we'll be understanding.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, CJ.
JD, do you have a Matt Bush update or kind of status or expectations for him this year?
Yeah, I think he's probably most excitingly, I think he's going to be a dad here pretty soon. So we're all excited for that piece of it. But I had a chance to see him a few times. He was training at the ballpark this winter. He looks great. He's in a great state of mind. He was really ready in his mind to compete in instructional league last year. And we just felt like, we didn't really see a huge benefit of that. So we felt like give him a little extra time and be ready. He's when he's healthy, we know he's effective. And I've kind of got him down in my mind as a, pretty good chance to perform, for this club. Really like the way he's gotten after. I think he has a real understanding of what he needs to do to be successful at the big leagues at this point. And, Dr. Meister and our medical staff are real encouraged that he had that extra time to let the arm, really heal and and get strong. So looking forward to seeing it.
Is there an extra draw there with him because the bullpen is so young? I mean, I think the projected bullpen, everybody but Leclerc, it might be a year or under service time. And obviously he's had a pretty incredible journey. Is that component all going to play in here with Matt Bush?
Could be. I mean, we talk about some like the irony and the full circle of his career, right? If he's the veteran, to your point. But he really does have, I think, a really good perspective on things, and obviously very aware and accountable of his past. But the life, the career he's created for himself, but through his hard work and the life he and Claire are creating here is, really happy for them personally. And based on that, yeah, I think what you just said has a chance to add some value.
Thank you, JD.
Okay, we'll go to Levi, and then Evan has one, and that'll be it. Go ahead, Levi.
All right, this one's probably for John Daniels more than anybody. Looking league wide at some of the stories we've had come out this winter, as far as like workplace harassment and things. I've heard you talk on multiple occasions about character being an important part of your hiring process. I'm curious if your vetting process has changed at all in the light of the last month or two, or if that's something you guys feel like you had a pretty good handle on before, or just kind of, I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's an excellent question. So from the standpoint of harassment, it's something that has been addressed here internally recently a couple times since these stories came to light. Admittedly, like I've read, several organizations talk about, specifically the Cubs and the Mets have talked about, their desire moving forward to include speaking with women colleagues or counterparts or people that have worked with potential hires. Like, admittedly, that has not been part of our practice in the past, and I'm not sure why we haven't done it. I hadn't thought of it, to be honest with you, but I do think it makes sense. We haven't done much hiring since these incidents have come to light, but I think we intend to adjust how we do things going forward. We try to do as best of a job as we can from a background standpoint, and we'll continue to try to get better there.
Yeah, that's good for me. Thank you.
Okay, Evan, last question.
Yeah, I just felt guilty because I hadn't asked Chris Young any questions. So, CY, from a player's perspective, and this camp is not going to be ideal for the idea of bonding or anything like that, but how much of a team's identity can be gained in spring training, or is that something that really only comes over the course of a season?
Well, Evan, I think it's a combination. But I think it certainly starts in spring training. I think the expectations really are set in spring training. And look, I think it's something that we've communicated to our staff and our front office that in a lot of ways, if we can get on board with the challenges that are going to be presented this season in terms of the COVID environment, the protocols, we can embrace those. It's a great opportunity. It's a competitive advantage to some degree as well. And I think that having a group of mentally tough players and coaches and staff and front office members who are not going to get down about the circumstances, we're going to embrace it. We're going to rise to the challenge, and it's going to become part of the identity and culture of our team. I think that's a real mindset that we're trying to achieve here. So certainly there are challenges that exist, and forming that identity throughout spring training and rising to the expectations that we're setting. It evolves over the course of the season, but the expectation is that we lay it out in spring training and we try to meet that and build on it throughout the year.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I'm gonna let these gentlemen go, and then I can make a few more, give you a little bit more insight to spring training protocols. So thanks, JD, CY, and Woody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.